My name is Ruby Porter. I'm 25 years old, and the people who once threw me out like trash are now asking if they can move into my house. If you'd told 17-year-old me that one day I'd own a little two-bedroom with a crooked fence and a lemon tree in the yard, I probably would have laughed. Back then, I didn't even know where I'd be sleeping from one week to the next. Growing up, there were four of us: my mom, my dad, my brother Jake, and me. Jake is 2 years older. In my parents' eyes, he hung the moon. If he got a B, it was the teacher's fault. If he forgot a chore, they said he was tired or stressed. If something broke in the house and we were both home, somehow it was always me. Ruby, what did you do? Was practically the soundtrack of my childhood. I wasn't perfect, but I was careful. I learned early that if I stayed small and quiet, things hurt less. I did my homework. I kept my room neat. I hid out at my friend Mia's place as much as I could because her house felt like a different planet, one where adults actually listened when you spoke. Jake, on the other hand, was the golden child. Star of the soccer team, loud laugh, messy hair, lots of friends. My parents loved that about him. "He's got charisma," my dad would say, clapping him on the back. When Jake messed up, they'd squint until they found a way to blame the world, or me. By the time I was 17, I had a plan. Survive long enough to graduate, save every penny from my part-time job at the grocery store, then move out and never look back. I pictured a tiny apartment with cheap furniture and no one screaming at me for breathing wrong. Freedom smelled like burnt coffee and laundry detergent. But I didn't make it to 18. It happened in the middle of my junior year of high school on a stupidly ordinary night. Mom had made pasta. We were all at the table. Dad scrolling on his phone, Mom telling Jake how proud she was of him for thinking about college, and me pushing peas around my plate. Jake mentioned his new girlfriend, some girl from his campus job. He was bragging about how she'd come to watch his game. I made a dumb joke, something like, "Wow, did she see you miss that open goal on Saturday too?" Jake's face flushed. Dad snapped, "Ruby, don't tear him down. He's working hard." I rolled my eyes and muttered, it was a joke, but the mood had shifted. Jake shoved his chair back so hard it scraped the tiles. "You always have to ruin everything," he threw over his shoulder as he stormed out the front door. I remember the sound of the front door slamming. I remember my mom sighing and saying, "Well, you really need to watch your mouth, Ruby." I remember thinking, fine, whatever, and going back to my homework later that night. I went to bed around 11. At 1:30 in the morning, the house phone rang. It was my mom's sister, my aunt. Her voice was trembling. "Ruby, there's been an accident. Jake, he crashed his car. Your parents are already at the hospital. Get dressed and call a cab, okay? I'll meet you there." My body went cold. I threw on jeans, grabbed my hoodie, and my hands shook so badly I could barely unlock my phone to call a ride. The hospital waiting room smelled like sanitizer and stale coffee. When I walked in, my parents were there. My mom's eyes were red and swollen. My dad was pacing like a caged animal. A doctor was just walking away. "Mom, Dad?" I said quietly. My dad spun, eyes wild. For 1 second, I thought he might hug me. Instead, he pointed at me. "This is your fault," he said. I actually looked behind me, convinced he was talking to someone else. "What?" "If you hadn't humiliated your brother at dinner, he wouldn't have gone out drinking with those idiots," my dad shouted, striding toward me. "He wouldn't have been on that road. He could have died, Ruby." My mom wouldn't even meet my eyes. She just sat there, clutching her purse, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I wasn't even there," I stammered. "I didn't make him drink. I didn't make him drive." "You pushed him," my dad snarled, getting in my face. I could smell coffee and rage on his breath. "You pushed and pushed until he snapped. Your brother is lying in there with a broken arm and a concussion, and if he'd died, that would have been on you." It felt like the floor fell away. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I was 17, standing in the harsh fluorescent light, being told that if my brother had died, it would have been my fault because I made a joke about his girlfriend. A nurse came over, her voice firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or step outside. You're upsetting the other patients." My dad snapped something back at her that I don't even remember. The nurse's eyes flicked to me, soft with pity. I wanted to disappear. We ended up leaving soon after because my dad couldn't calm down. I don't remember the drive home. I just remember my own breath in the dark car, sharp and shallow, and my mom wiping her eyes, saying nothing. At home, I thought maybe everyone would go to bed, cool down, and we'd talk in the morning. I was wrong. The front door had barely shut when my dad turned to me, face hard. "Go to your room and pack your things," he said. For a second, I actually laughed. What? You're not living here anymore. You want to tear this family apart? Fine, you can leave. I looked at my mom, desperate. Mom? She just stared at the floor, lips pressed together. That silence hurt more than any word she could have said. My dad followed me down the hall, grabbed a big black trash bag from the closet, and tossed it onto my bed. Put your crap in here and get out. I sobbed and begged and tried to explain that Jake's choices weren't my fault, but it was like yelling at a brick wall. In 20 minutes, I had a trash bag with some clothes, a few notebooks, and my phone charger. That was the sum total of 17 years in that house. When I stepped onto the porch, still crying, my dad shoved the bag after me and slammed the door. The porch light blinked out. Just like that, I didn't have a home. I walked 2 miles to Mia's house under the yellow streetlights, hugging that trash bag to my chest. My fingers were numb from the cold and from shock. When I knocked on her door at 3 in the morning, her parents stared at me like they were seeing a ghost. They let me in. They made me tea. They gave me a blanket and a couch. The next morning, they told me I could stay as long as I needed. My mom never called. My dad never texted. Jake never reached out. It was like I'd died and they'd just moved on. The next few years were a blur of survival. I finished high school. I worked shifts at the grocery store, then at a cafe. I got into community college, then transferred to a 4-year program. I learned to live on cheap instant noodles and secondhand furniture. Somewhere in those years, I met Daniel, my boyfriend now. He knows the outline of what happened, enough to understand why I flinch when someone raises their voice. By 25, I had a decent job and finally a tiny house of my own. I signed the closing papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I remember thinking, no one can throw me out of this place. This is mine. For 8 years, my parents and Jake were just shadows and old memories. I heard scraps of news through extended family. Jake recovered, they downsized, life went on without me. Not once did they check if I was alive. Then, a few weeks ago, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play, half expecting a scam. Ruby, it's your mom. Her voice was older, thinner, but unmistakable. We really need to talk. It's important. Please call me back. I sat on my couch for a long time, just staring at my phone. Daniel was in the kitchen making pasta. He could tell something was wrong from the silence. You okay? He called. It's my mom, I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. She wants to talk. We went back and forth for an hour. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend I'd never heard it. The other part, the one that still remembered birthdays and the smell of my mom's perfume, was curious and afraid. In the end, curiosity won. I called her back. She sounded relieved and awkward all at once. There was small talk. How are you? What are you doing now? Oh, you bought a house. That's wonderful. Then she cleared her throat. Your dad and I, we're in a bit of a situation, she said. We were wondering if maybe we could come stay with you, just for a while. Your father, me, and Jake. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. You want to move into my house? I said slowly. It could be a chance for us to be a family again, she said. To heal old wounds, just until we get back on our feet. We really need your help, honey. No apology, no mention of the night they shoved me out with a trash bag. Just we're in trouble, can we come over? My stomach twisted. On one side, the girl in the cold street, begging silently not to be abandoned. On the other, the woman who signed her own mortgage and finally felt safe. I need to think about it, I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Of course, Mom said quickly. Just let us know soon. When I hung up, Daniel sat next to me on the couch, his hand warm on my knee. What did she want? He asked gently. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. They want to move in, all 3 of them. His eyes widened. Into your house? Yeah, I said. Into the house I only have because they kicked me out. I stared at the lemon tree outside the window, its leaves fluttering in the evening breeze, and felt my chest tighten. The people who made me homeless at 17 now wanted me to rescue them, and I had no idea what I was going to say. Meeting my parents after 8 years felt like walking into a dream I didn't want to have. We agreed on a neutral place, a diner off the highway with sticky tables, humming lights, and the kind of cold air conditioning that settles in your bones. I arrived 5 minutes early and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Daniel had offered to come with me, but I told him no. This was something I needed to face alone. When I finally walked in, my parents were already seated in a booth. My dad looked smaller than I remembered. My mom's hands trembled around her coffee cup. Neither of them stood to greet me. Hi, Ruby, my mom said softly. I slid into the booth across from them, feeling like a stranger. You said you needed my help, so talk. They exchanged a glance. My dad cleared his throat. I got laid off last year. Haven't been able to find anything since. And I'm only working part-time, my mom added quickly, as if to soften the blow. It's been difficult. Mom went on to explain that a few months ago, Jake lost his job too, then his apartment. He moved back in with them. Their small two-bedroom apartment, already cramped, became impossible. Bills piled up. Their lease was ending. They couldn't afford to renew. As they talked, I listened. Not to their words, but to the space between them. The silence where their acknowledgement of what they'd done to me should have been. When they finished, I took a breath. Okay, but what does this have to do with me? My mom's eyes filled with tears. We were hoping, maybe, we could stay with you, just until we get back on our feet. And Jake? I asked. My dad nodded stiffly. All of us. I stared at them. 8 years since they threw me out with a trash bag, and the first thing they asked for is a place to sleep. You haven't even mentioned what happened when I was 17, I said quietly. They froze. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We were under a lot of stress. Jake was hurt. We weren't thinking clearly. That's not an apology, I said. Mom's lip quivered. We regret it, Ruby. Truly, we shouldn't have handled things that way. Handled things. Like kicking your daughter out of the house in the middle of the night was a paperwork error. I sighed and leaned back. Do you even understand what you did to me? Do you know what it's like to sleep on someone else's couch because your parents locked you out? Mom started crying openly. Dad bowed his head. We made mistakes, he said gruffly. Big ones. It wasn't enough, not close. After 2 hours of strained conversation, I stood up. I'm not giving you an answer yet. I need time. Mom touched my hand. That's all we're asking. I pulled away. That night, Daniel and I sat on the couch while he played absently with the drawstring of his hoodie, something he only did when he was worried. You don't owe them anything, he said gently, not after what they did. I knew he was right, but I also knew what it felt like to be desperate with nowhere to go. Before bed, I stared at my phone for a long time before texting Jake back. He had messaged earlier. Jake, can we talk? A part of me wanted to ignore him forever. Another part, smaller, weaker, wanted answers. I typed, Sure, what do you want to talk about? He called 10 minutes later. Hearing Jake's voice again was disorienting. He sounded older, tired, human. Hey, Ruby, he said. I guess this is overdue. I didn't say anything. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted you to get kicked out. I never wanted you hurt. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I expected. You didn't check on me, I said quietly. Not once. I know, he whispered. I was a mess after the accident. And Mom and Dad, they told me you left on your own, that you didn't want us contacting you. My throat tightened. That's not true. They kicked me out. I begged them not to. Jake cursed under his breath. I believe you. I swear I do. And looking back, God, Ruby, I should have tried harder. I was selfish. I wiped a tear before it fell. We talked for nearly an hour, about his job loss, about his medical bills, about the mess he'd fallen into. And then, quietly, Mom cries every night, Jake said. Dad's not doing great either. He had a heart scare last year. I'm scared what might happen if they end up on the street. The words hit me hard. I didn't want to care. I wanted to slam the door on all of it. But I'd always been the one who cared too much. I haven't decided, I said finally. But if I help, it'll be on my terms. That's fair, Jake said. And seriously, Ruby, I'm sorry. For the first time in years, I believed him. The following days were a storm inside my head. Mia told me to protect myself. Daniel told me he'd support whatever I chose. My heart told me to be cautious. My gut told me the situation was dangerous. But my conscience, the part of me that still remembered being 17 and scared, whispered something else. What if they really have nowhere else to go? And so I made a decision. I called my parents and told them they could move in for 3 months. Trial basis, clear rules, job hunting required, respect required. Any sign of disrespect and the arrangement ends. My mom sobbed with relief. My dad murmured, Thank you, kid. Jake texted a simple, We won't let you down. I wasn't sure I believed any of them. On the day they arrived, standing at my front door with suitcases and tired eyes, I felt something crack open in my chest. Fear, resentment, hope, dread, all swirling together. This is temporary, I reminded them. Of course, they said in unison. I stepped aside and let them in. As they crossed my doorway, the house I built alone suddenly felt smaller, heavier, stranger. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Ruby, you just opened the door to the past. Be ready for what comes with it." For the first 3 days, everything felt normal, or at least the version of normal people pretend to have when they know they're being watched. My mom cooked dinner every night, even when I told her not to. My dad thanked me too often, voice stiff, like the word thank hurt his throat. Jake picked up his shoes instead of leaving them in the hallway. They were trying, I could see it. But pretending is easy when you're desperate. The real test is time. By the end of the first week, the cracks started showing. I came home from work one afternoon and found my kitchen cabinets rearranged. Every plate, every cup, every spice jar pulled from the shelves and moved to better spots. "Mom," I said carefully, "did you move everything?" She smiled, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Sweetheart, your system made no sense. I fixed it for you." Fixed, like my home was broken. "I liked it the way it was," I said. "Please put it back." She blinked, surprised. "I was just helping." "Help by not changing my space," I said more firmly than I intended. Her face fell. "Okay." Jake had his own issues. For every day he made an effort, he'd slip twice. Dishes left in the sink, laundry piled in the corner of the guest room, video games on full blast when he was supposed to be job hunting. "Jake," I told him, "I need you to try harder." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, sorry, I will." And he meant it for the next 12 hours. My dad wasn't messy or intrusive. He was quiet. Too quiet. Eyes that avoided mine. Words that were clipped and formal, like I was his landlord, not his daughter. Then came the night I heard everything. I'd just gotten out of the shower when I heard my parents' voices in the kitchen. Low, irritated, the kind of tone people use when they think the walls will swallow the words. My dad's voice, "I can't stand living under her rules." My mom hissed back, "She can hear you." He didn't lower his voice. "We just have to deal with it until we save enough to get out. I'm not staying here a day longer than I have to." Silence. Then my mom whispered, "Don't make this harder." I stood in the hallway, towel in hand, heart pounding. Their words hit harder than the night they kicked me out. Because now I had opened my door, given them shelter, and they still couldn't respect me. I didn't confront them then. I walked quietly to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed, dripping water onto the floor. Too angry to move, too hurt to breathe. Later that night, Daniel called. "How's it going over there?" he asked gently. I swallowed hard. Not good. He didn't say "I told you so." He never does. Instead, he said, "Ruby, you're allowed to protect your peace, even from family." I stared at the wall. Is it crazy that part of me hoped they'd actually changed? "No," he said softly. "It's human." His ex, Tessa, used to weaponize guilt until he stayed longer than he should have. He told me once that trauma doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from people who love you the wrong way. Now I understood that better than ever. The next morning, I called a family meeting. If I didn't do it now, I never would. We sat in the living room, Mom wringing her hands, Dad stiff as stone, Jake leaning forward like he was bracing for impact. "I need to talk," I began, and I'm not sugarcoating anything. My dad exhaled sharply. My mom nodded, eyes glossy. "I feel disrespected," I said plainly, "in my own home." They looked confused, offended, silent. I listed everything. The kitchen cabinet rearranging. The messes. The lack of effort. The avoidance of real conversations. The fact that I felt like a guest in my own life again. And then I said the part that made my voice shake. "I heard what you said last night, about my rules, about how you can't stand being here." My dad's face drained of color. "Ruby," he started. "No," I interrupted. "You don't get to Ruby me right now." He shut his mouth. Mom started crying. Jake muttered, "Dad, seriously?" Dad ran a hand over his face. "I was venting. It wasn't fair. I shouldn't have said that." "It's not just what you said," I replied. "It's what it meant. That after everything, after kicking me out, after 8 years of silence, you still can't stand the smallest bit of authority coming from me." My dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. "This isn't working," I said. "Not like this." My mom reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Ruby, please," she sobbed. "We don't want to leave. Not yet." I swallowed hard. "Then tell me the truth." Dad stiffened. Mom blinked in confusion. "Why me?" I asked, voice trembling. "Why was I the one you sacrificed when Jake crashed his car? Why was I the one thrown out?" Silence. Then my dad broke. Literally broke. His face twisted, his eyes squeezed shut, and for the first time in my life, I saw him cry. "When they called about the accident," he said hoarsely, "I thought Jake was going to die, and he was already blaming himself, saying he ruined everything, saying saying he wished he hadn't survived. My mom sobbed harder. We were terrified he'd hurt himself. We thought if we redirected the blame, he might hold on. We weren't thinking about you. We weren't thinking at all. Dad shook his head. I was a coward. I couldn't handle watching my son fall apart, so I let you take the fall, and I'll regret that until the day I die. His voice cracked open, raw and broken. I felt something inside me splinter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, ugly and heavy as it was. I appreciate the honesty, I whispered, but it doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't, Dad agreed quietly. We sat in silence for a long, aching moment. Then I inhaled deeply and said the words I'd rehearsed in my head all night. You can't stay here. Mom's face crumpled. Ruby, please. I held up a hand. Listen, I'm not throwing you out today. I'll help you find somewhere else. I'll even help with deposits or the first month of rent. But we're not living together anymore. I can't heal with you in my house. Dad nodded slowly, painfully. We understand. Jake stood and hugged me. Then, quiet, gentle. You're doing the right thing, he whispered. Over the next week, we packed together, awkwardly, emotionally, like people trying to rebuild a bridge halfway through burning it. I helped my mom find a short-term rental. I bought Dad a new set of tools so he could pick up handyman jobs. I drove Jake to a job interview. On move-out day, my mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'm so sorry, she cried into my shoulder, for everything. Dad shook my hand first, then pulled me into a hug, something he'd never done before. Take care of yourself, kid. Jake hugged me last. I'm here, he said simply, when you're ready. And then the door closed. My house was quiet again, empty, but not lonely. For the first time in my life, the silence felt like mine. I stood in the doorway, breathed in the stillness, and whispered, I'm finally home.